Okay, good afternoon. Welcome back to the GL Events Theatre. Great to see you here at the first day of Event Sustainability Live. I'm just going to run through a couple of bits of housekeeping. I see some familiar faces, so you've probably heard me say it before. But there's a couple of screens either side of the stage that may be of interest to you. Just over here on my right or your left is a closed caption service operated by Interprify for anyone that is hard of hearing in the room. Over to the right-hand side, there is an app called Slido. If you scan that, you can raise any questions you like for the duration of this session. It's also the same QR code for both days of the show, so if you have any questions, feel free to raise them at any point. Speakers will stay at about this level of volume, so you can either wear headphones or not. It will be slightly clearer through headphones, but you should still be able to hear the speaker throughout anyway. We will do some questions at the end, I believe, so if anyone has any particular questions, we can bring the mic to you as well as you using Slido. I think that's everything, so all that remains for me to do is to welcome Lisa to the stage. She's travelled a long way, and I'm sure she'll tell you all about it, but thank you very much for being here, and we're really looking forward to this session.
I tend to move around a lot, so stands don't work real well for me. So thank you for coming this afternoon. I know it's getting to that afternoon time where we're all tired and we're all wondering, how soon we can actually go back to our rooms or our hotels. But I wanted to talk about how to design the cycle, really bringing, that circularity into event planning and execution. And what's interesting is the more we talk about this, and I'm thrilled that this is the first event Sustainability Live, the more we talk about this, the more we see things, you start not being able to unsee things. And so as we're starting to plan our events, we want to start incorporating that circular mentality into them. So just real quick, in terms of understanding circularity, when I grew up, and this will age me, it definitely was a linear economy, right? It was a take, make, dispose, or waste mentality. You took things, you made them, and you got rid of them. And I think we've seen that continue throughout history. And we're really trying to move into this circular economy where we're making things, we're using them, we're recycling them. And that's the mind shift that we're trying to make. And so we're trying to move into that, reduce the materials, reuse the materials, recycle the materials, upcycle the materials, anything that we can do to create that circular economy. And then we have to bring that into the event world. And that's where it gets really interesting. Because in the events industry, we have a really big carbon footprint. You've probably heard that. Events are not kind, right? When we're talking, especially when we're talking live events, they're not kind. And so we want to focus on those. So there's a number of different things and reasons why we want to focus. Obviously, we want to reduce our environmental impact. I think that's probably the number one reason that people start looking at it. But then we want to start looking at cost. Sometimes actually being sustainable is more cost efficient. Sometimes it's a little bit more expensive. We'll talk about that too and what that looks like in the long run, but we really want to look at cost efficiency. We want to enhance our brand image and our reputation. Companies that are focused on sustainability have a better brand reputation than companies that don't. We want to look at innovation and creativity. I think that's something we do really well in the events industry, is we innovate and we get really creative. But now we have kind of another reason to do it, right? We can be innovative, we can be creative, but from a sustainable standpoint, and bring in those new elements into our events. Long-term sustainability, we talked about the footprint, we're going to talk more about it. But what can we do over the long term, especially when we're doing repeat events? Meeting attendee expectations, this one is huge. Attendees have different expectations, they're growing, they're changing. And as they come to different events, they're now expecting more sustainable practices to be in place. So even things like, I don't have my badge on, the badge without the clip. There's no metal clip on this one, right? That little tiny thing makes a big impact. It also meant that I couldn't figure out how to put my lanyard on my badge this morning and had to ask for help. So we have to prepare for that as well. But we do have different attendee expectations as we're coming into these new events. Positive social impact, right, goes right up there with brand reputation. So in terms of events and the areas that contribute the most to the event's footprint, number one is travel. Now, I've had actually people look at me and say, well, how can you say that? You just flew in from the United States. That's not right. But, you know, when we look at things, long haul and short haul travel are both going to impact our events. When I fly into an event from the States, I probably do 2 to 3 events while I'm here. I do client meetings, potential client meetings, build-in vacation. I take all of those things and try to make them into one event, one travel, right? So that I'm not coming here 4 times a year to do 4 different things. So travel, long haul and short haul, right? Encouraging our attendees to use public transportation versus driving, things like that. We want to make sure that that is, you know, something that we're talking about because it is one of the largest areas that is contributing. Waste, food production, hotel accommodations, and the venue energy, those all factor in as well as a number of smaller things. So I actually pulled some data here from our friends over at Event Decision over here. They gave me permission to use this because I was having a really hard time finding current data. Everything I was finding online was from about 2019, and you know, we have all these amazing companies that are measuring data for us, and I couldn't find any. So they were nice enough to give me permission to use these. As you can see, 78%, and this is their data from April of 22 to May of 23, 78% of the overall event footprint was from travel. That's huge. Some other numbers, 7% from accommodation, 6% from materials, 4% from food and beverage, waste was just under 1%. And all of these things, when you put them together, even if you take the travel out, all of those other elements still have a really big footprint. And we need to be looking at what we can do in each of these areas when we're planning our event to try to bring those numbers down, even if we only focus on one area. So let's talk about planning. Maybe, there we go. So one of the first things that we can do when we're planning our events is look at sustainable sourcing, different ways that we can bring things in. So one, local. Find local vendors that you can use. If you're having somebody build your booths, have somebody who's doing it locally. Eco-friendly materials is very important. We want to watch what materials are coming onto our floors, or even within our swag, right? Are we using print that is a eco-friendly ink, right? Energy efficient equipment, LED lights, for example. Seasonal and organic catering. Food waste is huge in events. I was just talking to somebody this morning at one of the events I went to last year. I hit the lunch line probably about 1:30 in the afternoon, and there were just tables upon tables of boxed lunches stacked 10 high that were still there at 1:30 in the afternoon. All of that food's going to be thrown away, unless if that particular caterer has an agreement with somebody that they can actually donate that food after the event, and they have the means to do so. So if you can bring in seasonal catering, organic catering, don't order too much catering, any of those things will help with our sustainable sourcing. Fair trade products, sustainable merchandise, vendor sustainability practices. We ask our vendors what they do to help with their sustainability practices. We won't necessarily not pick a vendor, like if they're our only choice, but we do ask the questions when we're looking at them. We look at waste management plans. We're working with our venue in Seattle for one of our shows right now to find out, can we measure how much waste our particular show is generating? The answer is yes, but they have to empty the garbage before we hit the floor, and that's an additional cost, right? And somebody's moving out, so it's like you have to hit the button to empty the trash at the same, right exact time. Water conservation, sustainable transportation options, telling people and encouraging people to take public transportation. Digital solutions, we have moved almost entirely away from print. We still have a couple of things like big signs hanging in the ceilings for directional reasons that are print, but we're looking at what we're printing those on. Everything else that we're doing is digital signage. And then our community impact. Is there somebody that we can partner with in the community to have some positive impact in the community as well? And then in terms of waste minimization, you probably have seen most of these. Let me just pop them all up here. We'll see how far I go before I have to go backwards. We'll stop there just in case. You know, looking at the materials we're using, bulk dispensers and reusable items. I remember our first events coming back from the pandemic, everybody was handing out the little bottles of hand sanitizer versus having the big units in the hallway that we could all use, right? So looking at bulk dispensing, reusable items, again, the digital signage, digital communication. This one's hard. People still ask for a paper agenda, or is that just us? Like, people still get mad at us that we won't hand them a paper agenda. It's really an interesting phenomenon to watch. Proper waste segregation, food waste reduction, reusable event materials, packaging reduction. We ship so much stuff. It's amazing. So if we can reduce how much we're shipping and using packaging, either reduce swag and promotional items or choose wisely. Choose something that is a sustainable product if you're going to do swag. Make sure that you're choosing those right items. Green exhibitors and vendors, if you can find them. And I think that's a duplicate, isn't it? That's what happens when we do these late at night. Packaging reduction is there twice, and that means it's just doubly important. One of the things that we see that's really interesting with proper waste segregation, I'm still seeing events that have a waste basket in every booth, which is super convenient and horrible all at the same time, because everything gets put in that waste basket. I've also seen where, you know, you do have the multiple, you know, put the recyclables here, put your waste here, put your landfill here. And I literally have seen people, myself included, stand there indecisive because they just don't know where everything goes, right? So if we can label better, if we can explain better, then we're helping them to do that as well. And then the reusable event materials, making sure that if you have exhibitors that they're using booth materials that they're reusing for other events. They're not just printing things for one time, building things for one time. And then also in terms of, you know, we were talking about the papers and digital signage and things like that. I have seen sustainable events I have attended where the exhibitors had their sustainable materials that they were promoting, right? This is why we're wonderful. We have these beautiful packaging. We have all these different things that we sell that are sustainable. And let me hand you my paper brochure to tell you all about it. And it's just like, wait, what? So we just have to think through the process sometimes a little bit and make sure that we're doing what we say we're going to do and also communicating it in a way that is consistent and that we're not being contradictory, basically. So one of the ways that we can be more sustainable in our event planning is with partnerships and collaborations. It's hard to do this all by ourselves. Partnerships are going to be able to create that more sustainable event for you. So here's some potential partner opportunities for you. Again, local suppliers and vendors, use them. Use the small businesses, use the local suppliers and vendors. They're going to be able to provide something for you that doesn't require shipping. And a lot of times when you're using those local suppliers and vendors, your costs actually go down because they appreciate the fact that you're using somebody local and they actually will reduce costs for you. Sustainability consultants, there's a few on the floor here that you can talk to. Figure out how to measure what's going on at your event. Figure out who to partner with so that you can do those measurements and know what your footprint's going to be for your event. Waste management companies, I mentioned us having to empty the garbage before our event so that we can manage it. That's going to be a partnership that we're going to have to do through that particular convention center to make sure that it happens. Our eco-friendly product suppliers, we want to make sure that we're using those and working with those potential partners, again, to find out how we can replace things that maybe we can do things differently. Catering services with sustainable practices. This can be anything from the food they're using to the plates they're using. So any partnership that we can do with catering services, this one's a little bit hard because a lot of times if you're working with a convention center, you don't get a choice, right? It's company A or nothing. So, but even when you don't have a choice, you can have these conversations with them to say, this is what we want to focus on, help us be better. And whether it's even telling them, you know what, for the salad dressing, put half of it out, because we're not going to use it, and if we need to refill it, we'll refill it, right? But let's not throw away a bowl of salad dressing because we have this huge bowl out there. So talking through them, partnering with them. Venue providers committed to sustainability. I think this is the one that everybody focuses on right now. They're like, oh, we're going to get the venue that's a sustainable venue, and then we'll be okay because the check mark is marked in the box, right? So I think people are focusing on this, but it is really important. Whether their building is sustainable, whether they have sustainable practices within their building, both, partnering with them and finding that. Technology partners, we do a lot with technology, whether it's the platform we're using, whether it is Interprify, who is doing the closed captioning and translation here. We're using them for some of our events as well. We also are looking at, we work with digital signage partners. We have a lot of different technology partners that we work with. Our platform, we work with them to make sure that we are working with our remote attendees as well. Nonprofits, we love partnering with nonprofits. We love finding a way to give back. So if we can partner with our nonprofit partners in the area, that's great. Corporate sponsors with green agendas. This is a great way to actually help pay for your event. So if you have a potential sponsor that knows that you are really working at making your event more sustainable, and that is something that's important to them, a lot of times they will sponsor the part of the event for you, write you a check, which helps pay for your event, and then it's a win-win for both of you. So corporate sponsors with green agendas can be huge. And then the last one is attendees and participants. This one's actually the hardest sometimes. Not all attendees love the fact that you're being sustainable. You have like half of them that do, and half of them that don't. So sometimes communicating that, and we'll talk about that here in a second, can be a challenge, but at the same time, it can be a great partnership. It just depends on who your attendees are. So let's talk about those challenges, because sustainability can be hard. Anybody ever feel like the guy rolling the big stone up the hill? There are days. So challenges in implementation, the first one being cost. I have this conversation with people more often than not, because I want to bring something in. Let's say I want to bring in digital signage, and they're like, well, we don't need digital signage. We can do print signage. Print signage is cheaper. And my conversation is, one, have you looked at the cost of print lately? And two, even if it's cheaper, one, we can actually save money with digital signage, because digital signage, I can put more units on the floor than I can print things in terms of cost. But then from a sustainability standpoint, look at all that signage that we are now not throwing away. So cost concerns is a big conversation. Lack of knowledge or expertise. We just started focusing on sustainability in the last couple of years. I just got my sustainable events certification in the last year. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of conversations, and you're learning things nonstop. So lack of knowledge or expertise. Supply chain limitations, nobody's dealt with that in the last couple of years, especially if you're looking for a sustainable supply chain. Participant resistance, we'll talk about that. Logistical complexities, making it all work. Limited buy-in from stakeholders, few arguments there. Measuring impact, this is hard. I know we have all these companies and they're amazing, but it's still hard. You know why? Because now we have to go ask questions that nobody wants to answer. You guys all probably remember when you were registering for this event, there's 2 questions on there. One is, how far are you traveling? I have to Google it every time. You would think I would know by now. And two is, how are you going to get there? And, you know, multiple choice, right? You can add multiple things. So I've got my long haul answer in there. I have my public transportation answer in there. So Adam's really good about asking those questions. There's additional questions that we have to ask if we're going to truly be measuring our impact. Not everybody likes to answer them. I have a hard enough time asking people and getting people to respond to things like, what segment of the industry do you fall into? How many events do you plan a year, right? Nobody likes answering those. Not sure why. We all go to these events. We should know that by now. But measuring the impact is really, it can be difficult. Balancing sustainability with other event goals, sometimes I think we start focusing on that, and then we kind of forget about the event over here, right? Like, we get so focused on, are we being sustainable? Are we doing the right things? And then it's like, oh yeah, content, or oh yeah, experience, or oh yeah, engagement. So we need to make sure that we're balancing. So it's one more thing, it's one more hat that we're all putting on, because as event planners, we don't wear enough hats as it is. So let's just add one more of sustainability. So it can be really hard to balance that. And then adapting the scale. For anybody that is doing repeat events, anybody that is doing multiple events a year, being able to adapt to those sustainability practices, scale them up, increase them as your events grow, or increase them as you're doing more events can be a little bit difficult. So let's talk about how to overcome those. One is just innovate. Be innovative, be creative. Figure out new ways to approach things. Collaborate with people. Those partnerships are crucial. You don't have to do it all by yourself, nor should you do it all by yourself. So find the partnerships that you can utilize to be able to collaborate with. And then the last one is communication. And this one is huge. And I'm going to tell you a couple of stories that go with this. So communicating the benefits. Stakeholders, we have to talk to them first, right? They're the ones that are writing the check usually, agreeing to whatever's going on in the event. So the first thing is, the first part of the conversation we always have is, why should they care? Why is this a big deal to them? I have to be able to communicate it to them in terms that they're going to understand, but also terms that they care about, because they don't necessarily care about the same reasons that I do. So I need to be able to communicate to them why they should care. Those are long-term benefits. The cost savings, potential cost savings. I share success stories with them. I share research with them. I share data with them. Data is really important. And I mentioned how hard it is to find it, so that can be a real challenge. But I do want to share that data with them. And then I remind them that, you know, it's a positive brand image, right? They're going to get that in the long term. So those are all things that I will communicate to my stakeholders. My attendees are a whole different story. So here's a sample. So last year, we had a 13,000 person hybrid event, small little event. 2,200 digital posters. It was a medical conference. 2,200 digital posters. 1,900 sessions in 5 days. And sleep for like 2 months. But we all thought it was a great idea, right? 2,200 posters. We're going to make them all digital. Do you know how much paper we saved with 2,200 posters not being on the floor? I actually have no idea. I haven't calculated it. Somebody needs to do that for me. But we, you know, a medical poster on average usually has what, 20 pieces of paper on that trifold? Plus you talk about the size of the room that you would need for that, right? All the energy, the air conditioning, all of that we saved by putting them online on a digital platform. We had videos, they could interact with the poster presenters. It was amazing. Want to know what the biggest complaint was on the survey that year? We made all the digital, or posters digital. They hated it. Because they're physicians, and what are physicians used to? Physicians are used to walking the floor, looking at 20 pieces of paper on every single trifold. We didn't forewarn that. I mean, we told them ahead of time, oh, the posters will be digital. I don't think they understood what that meant. So that was our biggest complaint back from them was, what do you mean these are digital? We didn't tell them, hey, these are all the reasons that we're doing this. By the way, you can interact with everybody, right? Like, that hasn't gone away. It's just the paper's going away. So if we had done a better job of communicating with them, it would have been much better. So you want to clearly communicate your sustainability goals to your attendees. Make them active participants. Find different ways, whether they are, you know, from a people standpoint, they're donating food, right, to be taken to the local shelter. I've threatened to have attendees help sort garbage. Nobody's taken me up on that one yet. But even, you know, instructions for recycling, talking to them about public transport options that you have, encouraging them to use the digital materials. I talked in my earlier session today, one of the things that we're doing is we're actually getting people into our platform 5 months before the event and running mini events in the platform to get them into the platform, used to the platform, navigating the platform, engaging with each other, so that when we get to this actual event date, the digital materials won't be that big of a deal, right? They'll be used to it. So we want to make sure that we're actually encouraging them and communicating all of that to them. And then lastly, communicating to the exhibitors. I don't know if anybody here was at IMEX last month in the United States. There'll be another one in Frankfurt later in 24. But they had a place where the exhibitors could donate things from their booth. So all that swag or whatever that they didn't want to ship back, they could put it in there. If they had larger items, they could, you know, scan the QR code and coordinate that. But clearly communicate your sustainability goals to them, make them active participants, give them instructions for recycling, have them agree to a sustainability pledge. We did a sustainability pledge for our Seattle event last year for the first time ever. 220 exhibitors, we had a 70% sign-up rate the first year. It was great, all because we communicated it. And then last, share your story of marketing. Highlight everything that you're doing, whether it's in your promotional materials, your social media, your educational content. Get people who are willing to sign up for green sponsorships, do campaigns that are interactive, press releases, media coverage, email marketing, sustainability reports, and if your venue or anybody you're using has a certification, share that. Make sure that people know. But it's all about storytelling, so you need to share that story in all of your marketing. And last, if you feel like this, because it's overwhelming, it's okay. What I tell people all the time is start with one idea, just one. Start with one thing, implement that, make it successful, and then move on to the next one. And then move on to the next one, and just do one thing at a time. It's much easier. So to close, just remember, circularity is essential for sustainable event planning. Collaborations and innovations drive success in implementing those practices. And adopting these circular practices not only benefit the environment, but also enhance the event's appeal to your attendees and your stakeholders. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, we can take those in the last couple of minutes, but I appreciate your time.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lisa. Does anyone on the floor have a question you'd like to ask? We've got a couple of minutes. Oh, there's one up on Slido. So how do you cope with pushback from suppliers who may not be open to sustainable changes?
We handhold them a lot. Like I said, we won't necessarily tell a certain supplier no, but we will encourage them. And we talk through with them to find out what their objections are. Is it something that's easily resolved, right? Or is it something that they're going to have to implement over time? But we will work with them to really have those conversations and figure out how we can slowly kind of move them towards being more sustainable.
Amazing. I've got a question, if there's not another one on the floor, just relating to the difference between kind of the UK and Europe and America. Just out of interest, how have you found kind of adoption of sustainable policies at home in America versus anything you've kind of heard of or experienced here?
Yeah, I think in the US, I think it depends on where you are. I think the UK is better as a global region in terms of being sustainable and implementing practices. And then in the US, it really is kind of a state by state. Different states behave differently. So like one of the beauties of the show in Seattle is Washington is a very, what I consider a green state, not only by color but in behavior. So it's really a lot easier to handle sustainable events up there than it is in maybe another state located somewhere else.
Very, very diplomatic. Any other questions from anyone in the room at all? No? Okay. All that remains then is to say a massive thank you, Lisa. Just very quickly, if people want to speak to you, if they want to find out a bit more information about what you do, what's the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. Let me pull that up. You can connect with me here. This is just my contact card on Hi Hello, my digital business card, so feel free to connect with me there. I'm happy to have a conversation with folks as well if you want to just schedule a call. I love talking about this, so happy to do so.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Lisa.
Thanks, everybody.